The blazing Arizona sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Douglas as Clara Beaumont stared down the barrel of a revolver, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had known coming west alone was dangerous, but nothing had prepared her for the gang of rough-faced men who now surrounded the stagecoach, their intentions as clear as the cloudless sky above. Well, what do we have here? The leader of the bandits leered, his scarred face twisted into a grotesque smile as he yanked Clara from the coach. Looks like we found ourselves something prettier than gold today, boys. It was the spring of 1878, and Clara had traveled from Boston to Arizona Territory with dreams of teaching at the newly established school in Douglas. At 22, she had been eager to escape the suffocating constraints of Eastern society to make her own way in the world. Now, as rough hands bound her wrists and hoisted her onto a horse, she wondered if her independence would cost her everything. "Please," she begged, meeting the terrified eyes of the stagecoach driver who lay wounded in the dust. "Help me." The driver could only shake his head helplessly as the bandits gathered their spoils, the passengers' valuables, the mail pouch, and Clara herself. From the ridge overlooking the road, a lone figure watched the scene unfold. Noah Mitchell had been tracking the Blackwell Gang for 3 days, following the trail of robbery and destruction they'd left across Cochise County. The former Texas Ranger had promised the sheriff of Douglas he'd bring the outlaws to justice, but he hadn't expected to witness a kidnapping. Through his spyglass, he saw the young woman's face, pale with fear but somehow still defiant as she was carried away. Something stirred in his chest, a feeling he thought had died years ago alongside his wife and child during a Comanche raid. Noah lowered the spyglass, his jaw set with determination as he watched the dust cloud from the bandits' retreat. The stagecoach driver was struggling to his feet, clutching his bleeding arm. "They took her," the driver gasped when Noah rode down to the scene. "The Blackwell Gang rode off with that poor Boston lady heading to Douglas to be our schoolteacher." Noah's eyes narrowed as he stared in the direction the bandits had fled. His hand tightened on the reins of his stallion, Tempest. "Then I'll ride faster than sin itself," he vowed, his voice carrying on the desert wind. Without another word, Noah swung into the saddle, urging Tempest into a gallop. The bandits had at least a half-hour head start, but he knew these lands better than most. If they were headed for their hideout in the Dragoon Mountains, as he suspected, there was a chance he could cut them off at Cottonwood Pass. As Tempest's hooves thundered across the hard, packed earth, Noah's mind raced with possibilities. The Blackwell Gang was notorious for their cruelty, especially their leader, Jackson Blackwell, a man whose reputation for violence against women made Noah's blood run cold. Whatever happened, he had to reach Clara before nightfall. Clara struggled against the ropes binding her wrists as the bandit's horse galloped across the desert. Her captor, a man they called Rattler, kept a tight grip around her waist, his breath hot and foul on her neck. "Stop your squirming, lady," he growled. "Boss has plans for you and they don't include you getting away." "What do you want with me?" Clara demanded, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Her father had always told her that showing weakness to predators only encouraged them. Rattler laughed, the sound like stones grinding together. "Boss likes educated women, says they're more interesting to break." Clara's blood turned to ice. She had heard stories of women captured by outlaws, their fates too terrible to contemplate, but she would not be broken, not by these men, not by anyone. As they rode, she studied the landscape, memorizing landmarks, noting the position of the sun. If an opportunity for escape presented itself, she would be ready. The gang rode hard for hours, stopping only briefly to water the horses at a small creek. While the men were distracted, Clara managed to work a small knife from her boot, a gift from her father before she left Boston. "The West is wild, daughter," he had said. "A lady should always have protection." She quickly tucked it into her sleeve before anyone noticed. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the bandits approached a narrow pass between towering rock formations. Clara counted 6 men in total, the leader, Blackwell, with his distinctive scarred face, Rattler, who held her captive, a thin man they called Spider, a Mexican outlaw named Vasquez, and two younger men whose names she hadn't caught. "We'll make camp at Eagle's Nest," Blackwell called out. "Spider, you and Tate take the rear. Make sure we ain't followed." Clara's heart sank. If they reached their hideout, her chances of rescue or escape would dwindle to nothing. Noah rode hard, pushing Tempest to his limits but careful not to exhaust the powerful stallion. Years of tracking had taught him to read the land like a book: broken twigs, displaced stones, the particular way dust settled after riders passed. The bandits weren't bothering to cover their tracks, confident in their head start and knowledge of the terrain. But they didn't know that Noah had spent the last 5 years mapping every canyon, wash, and pass in this part of the territory. After losing his family, he had thrown himself into his work as a bounty hunter, using his skills to bring outlaws to justice across the Southwest. It was a lonely existence, but it kept the ghosts at bay most of the time. As the sun began to set, casting long purple shadows across the desert, Noah reached Cottonwood Springs. He dismounted, allowing Tempest to drink while he studied the ground. Fresh hoofprints led toward the narrow pass ahead exactly as he'd predicted. He checked his weapons. A Winchester rifle, a Colt Peacemaker, and a Bowie knife tucked into his boot. Noah knew he was outnumbered, but surprise would be on his side. If he could reach the narrow part of the pass before they made camp, he might be able to pick off a few of the outlaws before they knew what hit them. "Come on, boy," he murmured to Tempest, swinging back into the saddle. "We've got a lady to save." Clara watched the sun sink below the horizon with growing dread. The bandits had made camp in a small canyon, building a fire against the evening chill. Blackwell had tied her to a juniper tree, just close enough to the fire to feel its warmth but far enough away to prevent any hope of burning through her bonds. "You boys keep an eye on our guest," Blackwell instructed, his eyes lingering on Clara with a hunger that made her skin crawl. "I'm gonna scout ahead, make sure the way to Eagle's Nest is clear." As he rode off, the remaining bandits shared a bottle of whiskey, their laughter growing louder as the liquor loosened their tongues. Clara worked steadily at the ropes with her small knife, careful to keep her movements hidden by the gathering darkness. "What do you think the boss wants with her anyway?" one of the younger outlaws asked, nodding toward Clara. Rattler spat into the fire. "Same thing he wanted with that lady from Tombstone last month. Remember how long she screamed before he was done with her?" The men's laughter sent shivers down Clara's spine, but she channeled her fear into determination. The knife was making slow progress against the thick ropes, but she could feel them beginning to fray. Just as one strand snapped, a sound from the darkness beyond the camp caught everyone's attention. A stone, dislodged from the canyon wall, clattered down the slope. "Spider, check it out," Vasquez ordered, reaching for his gun. Spider grabbed his rifle and disappeared into the shadows. The remaining outlaws fell silent, hands on their weapons as they scanned the darkness. A single gunshot echoed through the canyon, followed by silence. "Spider." Rattler called out, rising to his feet. Another shot rang out and Rattler clutched his chest, a look of surprise on his face as he crumpled to the ground. The camp erupted in chaos. The remaining outlaws overturned the coffee pot to douse the fire, plunging the area into darkness as they sought cover behind rocks and saddles. Clara worked frantically at her bonds, sawing with renewed vigor as gunfire erupted around her. Just as the ropes gave way, a strong hand clamped over her mouth. She tried to scream, bringing up the knife to defend herself. "Easy," a deep voice whispered in her ear. "I'm here to help. Name's Noah Mitchell. I was tracking the Blackwell Gang when they took you from the stagecoach." Clara stopped struggling, relief washing over her. "They'll kill you," she whispered when he removed his hand. "There are 4 more, including Blackwell, who rode ahead." "Already took care of 2, Noah replied, guiding her behind a large boulder as bullets whizzed overhead. "Can you ride?" "Yes," Clara answered without hesitation. "My father raised me in the saddle before we moved to Boston." Noah nodded, impressed by her composure despite the circumstances. "When I give the word, run for the black stallion tethered behind those rocks. Stay low and don't stop no matter what you hear." Clara gripped her small knife, ready. "What about you?" the The moonlight caught his face for just a moment, strong, weathered features, eyes sharp as a hawk's, and a determination that somehow calmed her racing heart. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. Noah raised his rifle, firing 3 rapid shots toward the outlaw's position. "Now," he hissed, and Clara darted from behind the boulder, staying low as she sprinted toward the shadows where Noah had left his horse. Tempest was waiting, alert and ready despite the gunfire. Clara grabbed the saddle horn, hoisting herself up with practiced ease just as Noah emerged from the darkness, firing his revolver to cover their retreat. He vaulted into the saddle behind her, taking the reins and spurring Tempest into motion. The powerful horse responded instantly, leaping forward into a gallop as bullets kicked up dust around them. "Hold tight," Noah called as they thundered down the canyon. "Blackwell will be back when he hears the shooting, and he knows these mountains better than most." Clara gripped the saddle horn, acutely aware of Noah's solid presence behind her, his arm around her waist as he guided Tempest through the darkness with uncanny precision. "Where are we going?" she asked, raising her voice over the pounding hooves. "There's a place about 5 miles east, an old mining cabin. We can lay low until morning, figure our next move." They rode in silence for nearly an hour, the only sounds the rhythmic breathing of the horse and the occasional call of a night bird. Clara's mind raced with questions, but the immediacy of danger kept her focused on the present. When they finally reached the cabin, a small, weathered structure nestled among pines, Noah dismounted first, scanning the area with his rifle ready before helping Clara down. "It's not much," he said, leading her inside after tending to Tempest, "but it's defensible and there's water nearby." The cabin was indeed sparse: a rough wooden table, a stone fireplace, and a narrow cot against one wall. Noah lit a small lantern, keeping the flame low to avoid attracting attention. In the soft light, Clara got her first clear look at her rescuer. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the kind of strength that comes from a life lived outdoors. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and a few days' stubble shadowed his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a clear, intense blue that seemed to see right through her. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over her with concern. Clara shook her head, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance. No, they didn't. They were waiting until they reached their hideout. She couldn't suppress a shudder at the thought. Noah's jaw tightened. "You're safe now," he said firmly. "I've been tracking Blackwell for weeks. Man's got a bounty on his head that would make a preacher consider taking up the gun." "You're a bounty hunter?" Clara asked, sinking onto a rough wooden chair, the events of the day finally catching up to her. "Among other things, used to be a Texas Ranger." Noah busied himself checking the cabin's perimeter, testing the shutters on the small windows. "What brings a Boston lady to Douglas, Arizona? It's not exactly a garden party out here." Clara straightened her shoulders. "I came to teach school. There are children in these territories who need education just as much as any child back east." Noah raised an eyebrow, a hint of admiration in his expression. "That's brave. Foolhardy maybe, but brave. It wasn't my intention to be kidnapped by outlaws on my first day in Arizona," Clara replied with unexpected spirit, earning a small smile from Noah. "Fair enough." He set his rifle against the wall and pulled a canteen from his saddlebag. "You should drink something, miss." "Beaumont, Clara Beaumont." She accepted the canteen gratefully. "And thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for saving my life." "Noah," he corrected. "And you're welcome, though we're not out of danger yet. Blackwell won't give up easily. Man's got a reputation to protect, and he doesn't take kindly to losing what he considers his property." Clara bristled at the word. "I am no man's property." Noah studied her, that hint of a smile returning. "No, Miss Beaumont, I don't believe you are." He moved to the fireplace, arranging kindling for a small, controlled fire. "We should rest while we can. At first light, we'll head for Douglas. It's about 30 miles southwest. With luck, we can make it by nightfall tomorrow." Clara watched him work, questions burning in her mind. "Why did you come after me? You didn't know me." Noah's hands stilled for a moment. "I saw what happened through my spyglass, was tracking Blackwell anyway," he shrugged. "Couldn't just ride away." There was more to it, Clara sensed, but she didn't press. Instead, she said, "Well, I'm grateful. Not many would risk their lives for a stranger." Noah didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. "Get some rest, Miss Beaumont. You take the cot, I'll keep watch." Clara wanted to protest, to insist he needed rest too, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. The narrow cot looked more inviting than any feather bed in Boston at that moment. "Wake me in a few hours," she said, moving toward the cot. "You'll need rest too if we're to outrun them tomorrow." Noah nodded, though they both knew he had no intention of sleeping while danger lurked in the darkness outside. As Clara settled onto the rough blanket, she watched Noah through half-closed eyes. He moved with quiet efficiency, checking his weapons, listening at the door, a man accustomed to danger and solitude. For the first time since the bandits had appeared on the road, Clara felt truly safe. Sleep claimed her quickly, the rhythmic sound of Noah's movements like a sentry keeping nightmares at bay. Noah watched Clara sleep, her breathing deep, and even despite the ordeal she'd endured. There was a strength in her that surprised him, not just physical courage, but a kind of inner resilience that reminded him of the women he'd known growing up on the frontier. He checked his pocket watch by the low firelight, just past midnight. They had a few hours before dawn, and he intended to put as much distance between them and Blackwell's gang as possible once the sun rose. Moving to the cabin's single window, Noah peered through a gap in the shutters. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. No sign of pursuit yet, but he knew better than to let his guard down. Blackwell was cunning, and these mountains were his territory. Noah's thoughts drifted to the woman sleeping behind him. Clara Beaumont was nothing like what he'd expected of an Eastern lady coming west to teach. There was fire in her, and intelligence in those amber eyes that had assessed him just as carefully as he'd assessed her. It had been a long time since Noah had allowed himself to notice such things about a woman. After losing Sarah and their infant son to the Comanche raid 5 years ago, he'd locked away that part of himself, focusing instead on the hunt, tracking outlaws across the territories, delivering justice where the law couldn't reach. A sound outside, the soft snap of a twig, pulled him from his thoughts. Noah extinguished the lamp with a quick breath, moving silently to position himself by the door, Colt in hand. For several long minutes he listened, every sense alert. Then came the distinctive call of a whippoorwill, too clear, too precise to be natural. It was a signal. Noah's jaw tightened. Blackwell's men had found them sooner than expected. He moved swiftly to the cot, placing a gentle hand over Clara's mouth as he roused her. Her eyes flew open, but to her credit, she didn't struggle or cry out when she recognized him. "They've found us," he whispered, removing his hand. "We need to move, now." Clara was instantly alert, gathering her skirts as she rose from the cot. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Can't be sure, at least 2 by the sounds." Noah grabbed his saddlebags, moving with practiced silence. "There's a back window. It's tight, but we can make it through. Tempest is tethered behind the cabin." Clara nodded, following his lead as they crept toward the small rear window. Noah eased it open, wincing at the slight creak of the hinges. "I'll go first," he whispered. "If there's trouble, I'll draw their fire. You head east toward those rocks we passed about a mile back." Clara gripped his arm. "We go together," she insisted. Before he could argue, a voice called from outside the cabin. "Mitchell, we know you're in there with the woman. Come on out, and maybe we'll let you die quick." Noah recognized the voice. Vasquez, Blackwell's right-hand man. "Looks like negotiations have begun," he muttered, then raised his voice. "That's mighty generous, Vasquez. Where's your boss? Too afraid to face me himself?" A bullet splintered the shutter, sending wooden fragments flying. Now, Vasquez called. "Is that any way to talk when we're being so reasonable? The woman belongs to Blackwell. Hand her over and we might let you walk away." Noah caught Clara's gaze in the darkness, saw the determination there. "Go," she mouthed, gesturing to the window. "I'll create a distraction." Before Noah could stop her, Clara grabbed his rifle and fired through the front window, then ducked as return fire peppered the cabin walls. "Damn it, woman," Noah hissed, but there was reluctant admiration in his voice as he quickly assessed their options. The gunfire had come from the front and left side of the cabin, at least 2 shooters. if they could get out the back window to where Tempest was hidden. "New plan," he said, pulling Clara close so she could hear him over the gunfire. "When I give the word, we both go out that window." "Stay low, get to Tempest. I'll be right behind you." Clara nodded, her face set with determination. Noah handed her his revolver, keeping the rifle for himself. "Now," he said, providing covering fire as Clara scrambled through the window with surprising agility. Noah followed, squeezing his larger frame through the narrow opening just as the cabin door splintered inward. Gunfire erupted behind them as they sprinted for the trees where Tempest waited, the stallion alert but steady despite the chaos. A bullet whistled past Clara's ear as she reached the horse. Noah fired back, the rifle's report thunderous in the night. A cry of pain told him he'd hit one of their pursuers. "Get up," Noah ordered, helping Clara onto Tempest's back before swinging up behind her. He dug his heels into the stallion's flanks, and they burst from the cover of the trees, riding hard into the night as bullets kicked up dust around them. They rode east, away from Douglas, knowing Blackwell's men would expect them to head for town. The moon provided just enough light to navigate, and Noah guided Tempest with the confidence of someone who knew the land intimately. After an hour of hard riding, when he was certain they weren't being followed, Noah slowed Tempest to a walk, giving the loyal stallion a chance to recover. "You're full of surprises, Miss Beaumont," he said, his voice low near her ear. Clara sat straight in the saddle, her breathing steady despite their narrow escape. "My father believed women should know how to handle a crisis. He taught me to shoot when I was 12. "Your father sounds like a sensible man." "He was," she replied softly. "He passed 2 years ago. It's why I decided to come west. There was nothing keeping me in Boston anymore." Noah heard the grief in her voice, recognized it as a companion to his own. "I'm sorry," he said simply. They rode in silence for a time, the rhythm of Tempest's hooves a soothing counterpoint to the tension of the night. "What now?" Clara finally asked. "They'll be watching the trails to Douglas." Noah nodded, thinking, "There's a ranch about 10 miles northeast of here. Belongs to an old friend, Sela's Garrett. We can rest there, get supplies, fresh horses, then circle back to Douglas through the high country where they won't expect us. You seem to know this area well." "I've spent 5 years tracking men like Blackwell across these territories." "You learn the land or you die." Clara turned slightly in the saddle to look at him. In the moonlight, her face was a study in shadows and determination. "And what made you choose such a life, Mr. Mitchell?" Noah was silent for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was like rough stone. "I had a wife once, Sarah, and a son. They were killed by Comanche raiders while I was away on ranger business. After that, well, a man needs purpose. Hunting men like Blackwell gives me that." Clara's expression softened with understanding. "I'm sorry," she said, the simple words carrying the weight of genuine empathy. Noah nodded once, uncomfortable with the sudden intimacy of the moment. "We should keep moving," he said, nudging Tempest into a trot. "Still a few hours before dawn." As they rode through the moonlit desert, Clara found herself increasingly aware of Noah, the solid strength of him behind her, the way he seemed to read the land like a map only he could see, the careful consideration he showed for his horse, even in danger. He was nothing like the gentlemen she had known in Boston, with their polished manners and empty compliments. There was something elemental about Noah Mitchell, something honest and uncompromising that drew her despite the danger surrounding them. By the time dawn painted the eastern sky with pale gold and rose, they had reached a small stream nestled among cottonwoods. Noah allowed Tempest to drink deeply while he scanned the horizon with his spyglass. "No sign of pursuit," he reported, offering Clara the canteen. "But we should rest only briefly. Garrett's ranch is about 2 hours' ride from here." Clara drank gratefully, then splashed water on her face, trying to wash away the dust and fear of the night. Her skirts were torn, her hair had escaped its pins, and she knew she must look a fright, but such concerns seemed trivial after what they'd been through. "Tell me about Douglas," Noah said as he refilled the canteen. "What made you choose a frontier town for your teaching?" Clara smoothed her hair back as best she could, securing it with the few pins that remained. The superintendent wrote that the children there had no formal education. Some of the Mexican families don't speak English, and the mining families move too often for consistent schooling. She straightened her shoulders. Every child deserves education, Mr. Mitchell, no matter where they were born or what language they speak. Noah studied her, a new respect in his gaze. Not many from back east would see it that way. Perhaps that's the problem, she replied simply. A half-smile touched Noah's lips before he turned to check Tempest's saddle. We should move. Garrett's place is in that direction, he said, pointing northwest toward distant hills. He's a good man, fought with me in Texas. Lost an arm at Gettysburg, but manages his ranch just fine with the help of his son and daughter-in-law. They mounted again, riding at a steady pace as the sun climbed higher. The landscape changed gradually, desert giving way to scattered grassland dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. In the distance, cattle grazed on the hillsides, the first sign of civilization they'd seen since fleeing the cabin. Garrett's spread, Noah explained. 3,000 acres, some of the best grazing land in the territory. As they approached the ranch house, a substantial adobe structure with a wooden porch spanning its length, a man emerged, rifle in hand. He was older, his left sleeve pinned up at the shoulder, his face weathered by sun and hardship. That's close enough, the man called, raising his rifle. Noah reined in Tempest, raising one hand in greeting. Silas, it's Noah Mitchell. The man squinted, then lowered his weapon, a broad smile breaking across his face. Noah, you old devil, what brings you to my doorstep looking like you tangled with a wild cat? Noah dismounted, helping Clara down before clasping Silas's hand in greeting. Trouble, old friend, the Blackwell Gang kind of trouble. Silas's smile faded as he took in Clara's disheveled appearance. Madam, he said, inclining his head respectfully, looks like you've had a rough journey. Come inside. Hannah will fix you something to eat and we can talk. Clara nearly wept at the simple kindness in his voice. After the terror of the previous day, the prospect of shelter and food seemed almost miraculous. Inside, the ranch house was neat and comfortable, with handmade furniture and colorful woven blankets adorning the walls. A woman emerged from the kitchen, tall and capable-looking, with graying hair tied back in a practical bun. Hannah, Silas called, we've got visitors in need of hospitality. This here's Noah Mitchell, an old comrade from my ranger days, and Miss Clara Beaumont, Clara supplied, mustering a smile despite her exhaustion. Hannah's keen eyes took in their state immediately. Sit down, both of you. I've got coffee brewing and biscuits just out of the oven. Whatever trouble you're in can wait until you've had something to eat. Noah's grateful look told Clara this was no unusual occurrence. The Garretts were clearly accustomed to providing refuge to those in need. As they ate hot biscuits with honey, salt pork, and strong black coffee, Noah explained their situation to Silas in low tones. The older man listened gravely, occasionally glancing at Clara with concern. Blackwell's a mad dog, Silas said finally. Been terrorizing settlements from here to the Mexican border. Sheriff in Tombstones had a bounty on him for months, but no one's been able to bring him in. Well, I aim to change that, Noah replied, his voice hard. But first I need to get Miss Beaumont safely to Douglas. She's expected at the school there. Silas nodded, thinking, you can't take the main trail. Blackwell's likely got men watching it, but there's an old Apache path through the high country that could get you there by tomorrow evening. It's rough going, but passable on horseback. We'll need fresh mounts, Noah said. Tempest has carried us far, but he needs rest. Take 2 of my horses, Silas offered without hesitation. The bay gelding and the sorrel mare are both trail-wise and sure-footed. Hannah rose from the table. And the young lady needs proper clothes if she's riding through rough country. I think my daughter-in-law's things might fit her. She gestured for Clara to follow her. Come, dear, let's find you something more practical than that torn dress. In a small bedroom off the main house, Hannah provided Clara with riding clothes, a split skirt, sturdy boots, and a cotton blouse, as well as a chance to wash and properly arrange her hair. Thank you, Clara said sincerely as Hannah helped her button the blouse. I don't know what would have happened if Mr. Mitchell hadn't come along when he did. Hannah's hands were gentle as she braided Clara's hair into a practical coronet. Noah's a good man, she said softly. He's had more than his share of sorrow, but it hasn't hardened his heart like it does some men. He told me about his wife and son, Clara said hesitantly. Hannah nodded. Sarah was a sweet girl. That loss nearly destroyed him. For a time, we thought he might drink himself to death or get himself killed hunting down every Comanche warrior he could find. She secured Clara's braid with pins, but he found his way back to some kind of purpose, even if it's a dangerous one. Clara studied her reflection in the small mirror. A different woman looked back at her, more frontier than Boston lady, and somehow it felt right. He's risking his life for a stranger, she said, more to herself than to Hannah. The older woman smiled knowingly. Men like Noah don't know how to do otherwise. It's in their blood. She patted Clara's shoulder. Come now, they'll be waiting, and you've got a long ride ahead. Outside, Noah was loading supplies onto 2 fresh horses' food, water, ammunition, and bedrolls. He paused when Clara emerged, his expression unreadable as he took in her transformation. Hannah's got good sense, he finally said, nodding approval. Those clothes will serve you better than city finery on the trail ahead. Clara approached the sorrel mare, stroking her velvet nose. Does she have a name? She asked Silas. Copper, the rancher replied. She's steady as they come, but she's got spirit when you need it. Clara smiled, feeling an immediate connection with the beautiful animal. Hello, Copper, she murmured. Looks like we're going to be friends. Noah finished securing their provisions, then checked both horses' saddles with meticulous care. When he was satisfied, he turned to Silas, extending his hand. I owe you, old friend. Silas clasped his hand firmly. You do the same for me. Just promise you'll stop by on your way back and let us know you made it safe. I will. Noah turned to Hannah, who handed him a package wrapped in oilcloth. Food for the trail, she said. And a clean shirt for you. You look like you've been dragged through a thorn bush backward. Noah's rare smile appeared briefly. Thank you, Hannah, for everything. As they mounted their horses, Silas approached with a final piece of advice. The trail splits about 12 miles north of here. Take the eastern fork. It's steeper but less traveled, and watch for sign. Apaches have been restless lately with the new mining operations pushing into their territory. Noah nodded, his expression turning serious once more. We'll be careful. He touched the brim of his hat in farewell, then turned his horse, nodding for Clara to follow. They rode north at a steady pace, the fresh horses eager despite their burdens. Clara found the split skirt allowed her to ride properly astride, a welcome change from the side saddle she'd been forced to use on the stagecoach. You look more comfortable, Noah observed after they'd been riding for an hour. Clara nodded, adjusting her hat against the sun. I haven't ridden astride since I was a girl sneaking out to the stables when my mother wasn't watching. She thought it unladylike. And what do you think? Clara smiled. I think I should have defied convention sooner. Noah studied her with that measuring look she was coming to recognize. You're not what I expected, Miss Beaumont. Clara, she corrected. After what we've been through, I think formality is rather unnecessary. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. Clara then. They rode in companionable silence, the landscape gradually becoming more rugged as they ascended into the foothills. Noah kept a vigilant eye on their surroundings, occasionally studying the horizon through his spyglass. By midday, the sun was fierce overhead, and they paused in the shade of a rock outcropping to rest the horses and eat some of Hannah's provisions: jerky, hard biscuits, and dried apples. How long have you known the Garretts? Clara asked, watching as Noah checked their position against a small, well-worn map. Since '71, he replied, tracing a finger along a dotted line that represented their current route. Silas saved my life during a skirmish with horse thieves along the Red River. We rode together for 2 years after that, until he decided to settle down with Hannah and start ranching. They seem like good people. Noah nodded, folding the map. The best. They took me in after Sarah and the baby died. Silas was the one who talked sense into me when I was hell-bent on killing every Comanche I could find. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. Reminded me that vengeance is a poison that kills the one who drinks it first. Clara absorbed this, understanding more about the man before her. Yet you still hunt outlaws. It's different, Noah said, rising to check the horses. I bring them to justice, not vengeance. There's a line there, even if it sometimes gets thin. As they prepared to continue their journey, a distant sound caught Noah's attention. He stilled, head cocked, listening intently. "What is it?" Clara asked, instantly alert, horses, several of them coming fast. Noah quickly gathered their things, scanning the area for cover. "Could be nothing, but we can't take that chance." They mounted swiftly, Noah leading them up a narrow ravine that offered concealment from the main trail. From a sheltered position among the rocks, they watched as 5 riders appeared below, moving at a rapid pace. Even from a distance, Clara recognized the scarred face of Blackwell at the head of the group. "They're following our trail," Noah murmured, his voice tight with concern. "And they're gaining." Clara felt fear coil in her stomach, but forced herself to think clearly. "The Garretts, will they be in danger?" Noah shook his head. "Silas can take care of himself, and Blackwell is after us, not them." He studied the outlaws' progress, calculating, "We need to lose them before nightfall, if they're still on our trail when we make camp." He didn't need to finish the thought. Clara understood the danger all too well. "What's your plan?" she asked, trusting his judgment implicitly now. Noah pointed to a rocky ridge above them. "We go up and over. The horses will struggle, but it'll be worse for their mounts. And if we're lucky, the rain coming will wash away our tracks." Clara glanced up, noticing for the first time the dark clouds gathering in the western sky. "Lead the way," she said simply. The ascent was grueling, a barely visible game trail that switchbacked up the steep slope. Several times they had to dismount and lead the horses over particularly treacherous sections. Clara's hands were soon scraped and bleeding from grasping at rocks for balance, but she never complained, her determination matching Noah's own. By the time they crested the ridge, the first heavy drops of rain were falling and thunder rumbled in the distance. Below, they could see the bandits still following their original trail, unaware that their quarry had changed course. "We've bought some time," Noah said, helping Clara remount. "But we need to find shelter before this storm hits full force." They descended the far side of the ridge as the rain intensified, turning the trail slick and dangerous. Lightning split the sky, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that spooked the horses. Clara fought to control Copper as the mare pranced nervously. "Easy, girl," she soothed, stroking the horse's wet neck. "Easy now," Noah pointed ahead through the curtain of rain. "There, see that dark line along the cliff face? Might be a cave or an overhang, better than nothing in this weather." They urged their reluctant mounts forward as the storm unleashed its full fury. Wind-driven rain lashed at them, soaking through their clothes despite their efforts to cover up. By the time they reached the cliff face, they were both shivering with cold. To their relief, Noah's sharp eyes had been correct, a shallow cave cut into the rock, just deep enough to provide shelter from the worst of the storm. They led the horses inside, unsaddling them quickly to let their coats dry. Noah worked efficiently to establish their camp, laying out bedrolls on the dry cave floor while Clara tended to the horses, rubbing them down with a piece of blanket to dry their coats. "No fire tonight," Noah said grimly, surveying their supplies. "Smoke would give away our position. We'll have to make do with cold food and each other's company." Clara nodded, wrapping herself in a blanket Hannah had provided. Despite her discomfort, she was grateful for the storm. It would wash away their tracks and make pursuit nearly impossible until morning. They ate in silence, listening to the rain drumming against the rocks outside and the occasional rumble of thunder. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped further, and Clara found herself shivering despite the blanket. Noah noticed immediately. "Here," he said, moving closer and offering his own blanket. "Take this too." Clara shook her head. "Then you'll freeze. We should share the blankets for warmth." In the dim light, she couldn't read his expression, but she sensed his hesitation. "I'm not proposing anything improper, Mr. Mitchell," she said, attempting a light tone. "Merely a practical solution to avoid freezing to death." A low chuckle escaped him the first time she'd heard him laugh. "I reckon you're right, and I thought we'd agreed on Noah, not Mr. Mitchell." They arranged their bedrolls side by side, then awkwardly positioned themselves beneath the combined blankets. At first, they maintained a careful distance, but as the night grew colder, practicality overcame propriety. Clara found herself nestled against Noah's side, his arm around her shoulders providing warmth that slowly seeped into her chilled bones. "Better?" he asked, his voice a rumble she could feel through his chest. "Yes," she admitted. "Thank you." They lay in silence for a time, the steady rhythm of the rain creating a cocoon of isolation around them. Clara was acutely aware of Noah beside her, the solid strength of him, the faint scent of leather and horses that clung to his clothes, the careful way he held her, providing warmth without presumption. "Why teaching?" he asked suddenly, his voice soft in the darkness. "You could have stayed in Boston, found a comfortable life there." Clara considered the question, appreciating that he didn't assume she was simply running from something, as so many had. "I believe in the power of education to change lives," she said finally. "My father was a professor at Harvard. He taught me that knowledge is the great equalizer, that with the right education, anyone can rise above the circumstances of their birth." She shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position without moving too far from the warmth he provided. "When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in Douglas, I knew it was my opportunity to make a difference. These frontier children deserve the same chances as the privileged students in Boston's finest schools." Noah was quiet for so long that Clara wondered if he'd fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice thoughtful. "It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind for a principal." "No more courage than it takes to face outlaws to uphold justice," she countered. She felt rather than saw his smile in the darkness. "Touché, Miss Beaumont." "Clara," she reminded him gently. "Clara," he echoed, and something in the way he said her name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with shared blankets. Outside, the storm began to abate, the rain softening to a gentle patter against the rocks. Clara found herself oddly reluctant for morning to come, for this strange intimacy to end. "We should try to sleep," Noah said, as if reading her thoughts. "Tomorrow will be a hard ride if we want to reach Douglas by nightfall." "Yes," Clara agreed, though sleep seemed impossible with her heart beating so fast. "Good night, Noah." "Good night, Clara," he replied, his arm still protectively around her shoulders. Despite her certainty that she would lie awake all night, exhaustion soon claimed her, and she drifted into sleep, feeling safer than she had any right to under the circumstances. Noah woke before dawn, Clara still nestled against him in sleep. He eased away carefully, not wanting to disturb her rest. Outside the cave, the storm had passed, leaving a washed, clean world glittering with raindrops in the pre-dawn light. He checked their surroundings with practiced vigilance, satisfying himself that they had not been discovered during the night. The horses nickered softly in greeting as he approached, seemingly none the worse for their arduous journey the day before. "Good morning." Noah turned to find Clara standing at the cave entrance, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face soft with sleep. In that moment, with the first golden light of dawn illuminating her, he thought he had never seen anyone so beautiful. The thought unsettled him. 5 years of solitude had taught him to guard his heart, to keep his distance from entanglements that could only lead to pain. Yet something about Clara Beaumont had slipped past those defenses with unsettling ease. "Morning," he replied, focusing on saddling the horses. "Storms passed." "We should be able to make good time today," Clara approached, beginning to braid her hair with deft fingers. "Any sign of pursuit?" Noah shook his head. "Rain would have washed away our tracks. They'll be searching blind now." Relief softened her features as she secured her braid with pins from her pocket. "How far to Douglas from here? If we push hard, we can make it by sunset." Noah handed her a piece of jerky and a biscuit. "Breakfast. Not exactly what you're used to, I expect." Clara accepted the food with a smile. "I'm discovering I'm adaptable." They ate quickly, packed their few belongings, and were on the trail as the sun cleared the eastern horizon. The path Noah had chosen wound through high country, a rugged landscape of pine forests, rocky outcroppings, and occasional breathtaking vistas across the territory. Clara rode well, handling copper with confidence even on the most challenging parts of the trail. Several times, Noah found himself watching her, the grace with which she moved, the determination in her profile as she navigated difficult terrain. the way the sunlight caught in her hair. By midday, they had descended from the high country into rolling grasslands. In the distance, they could see the beginnings of settled land, scattered ranches, the occasional field of crops, signs of civilization returning after the wilderness. "Is that Douglas?" Clara asked, pointing to a smudge on the horizon. Noah nodded. "Another few hours' ride. We'll approach from the north to avoid the main road, just in case Blackwell has men watching the usual routes." As they rode, Noah found himself increasingly reluctant to reach their destination. Once in Douglas, their paths would naturally separate. Clara to her teaching position, he to resume his pursuit of Blackwell. The thought left an unexpected emptiness in his chest. "What will you do?" Clara asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "After you've delivered me safely to Douglas." Noah adjusted his hat against the afternoon sun. "Blackwell still has a price on his head, and after what he tried to do to you, I aim to see he faces justice." Clara studied him, concern evident in her expression. "He's dangerous, Noah, and he has men. You'd be facing them alone." "Wouldn't be the first time." He attempted a reassuring smile. "Besides, once the sheriff knows what happened, he might be willing to deputize a posse." Clara didn't look convinced, but she nodded, turning her attention back to the trail ahead. They rode in silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the outline of Douglas became clearer, a modest frontier town nestled in a small valley, with mountains rising beyond. Smoke curled from chimneys, and they could make out the movement of wagons and people along the main street. Noah led them on a circuitous route, approaching from the northeast through a stand of cottonwoods that provided cover. When they reached the outskirts of town, he reined in his horse, scanning the area carefully before proceeding. "The schoolhouse should be near the church," Clara said, pointing to a white steeple visible among the buildings. Noah nodded, guiding them toward it at a walk, alert for any sign of danger. The town was busy with the usual late afternoon activities, merchants closing up shops, miners returning from their day's work, women calling children home for supper. No one paid particular attention to two dust-covered riders making their way down a side street. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden structure next to the church, just as Clara had expected. A small house stood adjacent, presumably the teacher's residence. As they dismounted, the church door opened, and an older man in a black coat emerged. "Reverend Cooper," Clara called, recognizing the name from her correspondence. The man looked up, surprise and then relief washing over his face. "Miss Beaumont. We had given up hope when you didn't arrive on yesterday's stage, when word came of the robbery. I was taken by the bandits," Clara explained as the Reverend hurried over. "Mr. Mitchell here saved my life and brought me safely to Douglas." Reverend Cooper turned to Noah, extending his hand in gratitude. "Sir, the town of Douglas owes you a debt we can never repay." Noah accepted the handshake briefly. "Just did what needed doing, Reverend. You must both be exhausted," the older man said, ushering them toward the teacher's house. "Mrs. Cooper has supper waiting at the parsonage. We can send someone for your things later, Miss Beaumont." Clara glanced at Noah, a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly. It was safe enough now. They were in town, surrounded by people. Even Blackwell wouldn't be bold enough to attempt anything here. "Thank you, Reverend," Clara said. "We would be grateful for a meal, but first, I think we should speak with the sheriff about what happened." The sheriff's office was a sturdy building on the main street with a small jail attached. Sheriff Thomas Brody was a square-built man with a neatly trimmed beard and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Clara and Noah recounted their ordeal, occasionally making notes on a pad of paper. "Blackwell's been a thorn in my side for months," he said when they finished. "Robbed the bank in Bisbee last year, killed 2 men in Tombstone this spring. There's a $500 bounty on him from the territorial governor." Noah leaned forward. "He's still out there, Sheriff, and he's not the type to give up easily." Brody nodded grimly. "I'll send telegrams to the surrounding towns, put deputies on alert." He looked directly at Clara. "Miss Beaumont, I'd advise you to be cautious. Until Blackwell is captured, you might be in danger." "I'll be careful," Clara promised. The sheriff turned to Noah. "Mitchell, I've heard your name before. Texas Ranger turned bounty hunter, right? Noah nodded. That's right. Could use a man with your experience. I'd be willing to deputize you temporarily if you're interested in helping bring Blackwell in. Noah considered the offer. As a deputy, he'd have the law's authority behind him and a reason to remain in Douglas. His eyes found Clara's for a moment before he turned back to Brody. I accept, he said simply. The Coopers' parsonage was warm and inviting after days on the trail. Mrs. Cooper, a motherly woman with kind eyes, clucked over their disheveled appearance and insisted they both eat second helpings of everything roast chicken, potatoes, fresh baked bread with honey. After supper, Reverend Cooper showed Clara to the teacher's house, a modest but comfortable two-room structure with simple furniture and a small garden out back. It's not what you're accustomed to in Boston, I'm sure, he apologized, lighting lamps against the gathering darkness. Clara shook her head, smiling. It's perfect, Reverend, thank you. Noah had accompanied them, still watchful despite the relative safety of the town. As the Reverend excused himself to return to his wife, Noah lingered on the porch. Sheriff's organizing a posse tomorrow, he said, hat in hands. We'll start tracking Blackwell at first light, Clara nodded, suddenly anxious at the thought of him facing the outlaw again. Be careful, Noah. Blackwell strikes me as a man with nothing to lose. Those are the most dangerous kind, he agreed, but don't worry about me. I've been doing this a long time. An awkward silence fell between them. There was so much Clara wanted to say, but the words seemed inadequate after all they had shared. I should let you rest, Noah finally said, settling his hat back on his head. You've been through a lot these past days. So have you, Clara pointed out. Where will you stay tonight? Sheriff offered a cot at the office, said it makes sense to have someone on duty in case Blackwell is bold enough to try something in town. Clara took a step closer. Thank you, Noah, for everything. I don't know how I can ever repay what you've done for me. Noah's expression softened, a warmth in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. No repayment necessary, Clara. Just stay safe. Teach those children like you planned. Make a difference here. On impulse, Clara reached up and kissed his cheek. Godspeed tomorrow, she whispered. For a moment, Noah seemed frozen in place, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that took her breath away. Then, with a slight nod, he turned and walked into the gathering darkness, his tall figure soon lost among the shadows. Clara watched until he was out of sight, a curious mixture of emotions swirling within her. In just 2 days, Noah Mitchell had become more important to her than anyone since her father's death. The thought of him riding out to face Blackwell tomorrow filled her with dread, even as she recognized the necessity of it. Inside, she found that Mrs. Cooper had sent over basic necessities, night clothes, toiletries, and a change of clothing until her trunk could be retrieved from the stage office. Clara was grateful for the thoughtfulness, especially for the opportunity to bathe away the dust and fear of the past days. As she lay in bed that night, clean and safe for the first time since the stagecoach robbery, Clara found her thoughts continually returning to Noah. The memory of his arm around her in the cave, the quiet strength he had shown throughout their ordeal, the rare smile that transformed his solemn face, all had left an indelible mark on her heart. Be safe tomorrow, she whispered into the darkness, a prayer for the man who had risked everything to save a stranger. Dawn broke clear and cool over Douglas, the streets still quiet as Noah and 5 other men gathered at the sheriff's office. Sheriff Brody had selected his posse carefully experienced riders familiar with the territory and handy with firearms. Mitchell knows Blackwell's last position, Brody explained as they checked weapons and supplies. We'll start there, track them if we can. Remember, these men are dangerous. Blackwell himself has killed at least 6 men that we know of. Noah secured his Winchester in its saddle scabbard, his mind focused on the task ahead. He had slept little the previous night, his thoughts repeatedly turning to Clara, her courage during their escape, the feel of her beside him in the cave, the gentle press of her lips against his cheek in farewell. He pushed those thoughts aside. Such distractions could get a man killed when facing someone like Blackwell. As the posse prepared to ride out, Noah glanced toward the teacher's house, half hoping to catch a glimpse of Clara before they left. To his surprise, she was already awake, standing on the porch in a simple blue dress, her hair neatly braided around her head. Sheriff Brody noticed his gaze and smiled knowingly. "Go on," he said. "Say your goodbyes, we'll wait." Noah dismounted, crossing the street to where Clara stood. In the clear morning light, she looked rested, though concern shadowed her eyes as she watched the posse's preparations. "You're leaving," she said simply. Noah nodded. "Sheriff's got good men with him. We have a chance of bringing Blackwell in this time." Clara's hands twisted together, betraying her anxiety. "I've been thinking about what happens after." "After?" Noah's heart quickened despite his efforts to remain detached. "After Blackwell is captured, you'll move on, I suppose, continue hunting bounties." Noah studied her face, trying to read the emotion behind her carefully controlled expression. "That's been my life for 5 years. Is it the life you want for the next 5? Clara asked quietly. The question caught him off guard. For years, he had existed day to day, hunt to hunt, never considering a future beyond the next outlaw, the next reward. The thought of something different, something more permanent, had seemed impossible after losing Sarah and their son. Yet standing before Clara now, he could almost imagine it a life beyond solitude and revenge, a chance to build something rather than merely survive. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. Clara nodded, accepting his uncertainty. "When you decide, Noah Mitchell, I hope you'll let me know." She held out a small package wrapped in cloth. "For the trail, Mrs. Cooper sent biscuits, and I added some dried fruit." Their fingers brushed as he accepted the gift, and Noah felt the same jolt of awareness that had been growing between them since that night in the cave. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Mitchell," Sheriff Brody called, "we need to move out while the trail's fresh." Noah hesitated, torn between duty and the pull of something new and unexpected. "I'll be back," he promised Clara, "when this is finished." Her smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I'll be here, teaching school and waiting to hear your decision." With a final nod, Noah returned to the posse, mounting his horse, a sturdy bay provided by the sheriff to replace the tired mount from Garrett's ranch. As they rode out of town, he allowed himself one last glance back. Clara stood watching, her hand raised in farewell, a figure of grace and promise in the morning light. The posse rode north, following Noah's directions to where he and Clara had encountered Blackwell's men the previous day. The storm had indeed washed away most tracks, but Sheriff Brody proved to be a skilled tracker, finding signs of passage that would have escaped a less experienced eye. By midday, they had reached the cave where Noah and Clara had sheltered during the storm. Fresh hoofprints in the mud showed that Blackwell's gang had been there perhaps only hours before. "They're heading east," Brody determined, studying the tracks. "Toward the border, maybe. Or to Eagle's Nest," Noah suggested. "Their hideout in the Dragoons." Clara overheard them talking about it. The sheriff nodded grimly. "Makes sense. If we push hard, we might catch them before they reach it." They rode at a punishing pace, following the increasingly clear trail left by the outlaws. It seemed Blackwell had abandoned caution in his haste to reach safety, leaving broken branches and clear hoofprints for the posse to follow. Late in the afternoon, as they crested a rise, they spotted dust in the distance, riders moving fast across the valley below. "There." One of the deputies called. "Must be them." Sheriff Brody raised his spyglass, confirming the sighting. "4 riders. That would be Blackwell and what's left of his gang after your encounter at the cabin," he said to Noah. "They're making for that canyon," Noah observed, pointing to a narrow cleft in the mountains ahead. "If they reach it before us, we'll be at a disadvantage." Brody nodded, making a swift decision. "We'll split up. Mitchell, you take Jensen and Parker around to the east. Try to cut them off before they reach the canyon. The rest of us will follow directly, keep them moving fast so they make mistakes." The plan was sound. Noah and the 2 deputies spurred their horses down a game trail that would intersect with the outlaws' path. The terrain was rough, forcing them to slow their pace at times, but they were making good progress until a gunshot echoed across the valley. "They've spotted the sheriff's group," Jensen called, pointing to where dust clouds now billowed in earnest. Noah urged his mount faster, knowing they needed to reach the canyon entrance before Blackwell. If the outlaws secured that position, they could hold off the posse indefinitely from the natural fortification. They emerged from the foothills just as Blackwell and his men approached the canyon entrance. Noah raised his rifle, taking careful aim at the lead rider. "Blackwell," he shouted, "in the name of the law, surrender." The outlaws wheeled their horses, startled by the appearance of riders to their flank. For a moment, Noah thought they might comply. They were tired, outnumbered, with the main portion of the posse closing in from behind. Then Blackwell recognized him, and hatred twisted the outlaw's scarred features. "Mitchell," he snarled, raising his revolver. "You're a dead man." Gunfire erupted from both sides. Noah felt his hat torn from his head as a bullet passed close enough to ruffle his hair. He returned fire methodically, dropping one of Blackwell's men from the saddle. The outlaws scattered, two racing for the canyon while Blackwell and another man turned to engage the deputies. Noah pursued the fleeing men, determined not to let them escape into the maze of ravines beyond. As he rounded a bend in the canyon, a shot rang out, the bullet striking stone inches from his head. Noah threw himself from his horse, taking cover behind a boulder as more gunfire erupted. One of the outlaws was pinned down behind a fallen tree about 50 yards ahead, while the other had gained higher ground and was firing from a ledge above. Noah assessed the situation quickly, knowing he was exposed and outnumbered. A movement to his left caught his eye. Jensen was working his way along the canyon wall, trying to flank the outlaw on the ledge. Noah provided covering fire, keeping both men pinned down as the deputy maneuvered into position. The strategy worked. Jensen got a clear shot at the man on the ledge, who toppled forward with a cry, landing hard on the canyon floor. The remaining outlaw, seeing his companion fall, made a desperate break from his cover, firing wildly as he ran. Noah's shot caught him in the leg, sending him sprawling. By the time he had secured the wounded man, gunfire from the canyon entrance had ceased. He led his prisoner back, finding Sheriff Brody standing over a body while the other deputies secured a sullen, bleeding Blackwell. "That's all of them," Brody confirmed, satisfaction evident in his voice despite a bleeding gash along his arm where a bullet had grazed him. Blackwell tried to make a last stand, but he ran out of luck. Noah approached the captured outlaw, studying the man who had caused so much fear and suffering. Blackwell glared back, defiant despite his wounds. "That schoolteacher," he spat. "She worth dying for, Mitchell." Noah regarded him coolly. "You're the one bleeding, Blackwell, not me." The outlaw laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "You think this is over? There's always another Blackwell, always another outlaw. Men like you and me, Mitchell, were cut from the same cloth." "No," Noah said quietly, "we're nothing alike." They camped that night at the canyon entrance, the wounded outlaws secure under guard. 2 bodies were wrapped in blankets, tied across horses for the return journey to Douglas. Around the campfire, the posse shared coffee and quiet satisfaction at a dangerous job completed. Noah sat slightly apart, cleaning his weapons with methodical care as he considered what came next. For 5 years, he had drifted from town to town, bounty to bounty, with no place to call home. The thought of continuing that solitary existence suddenly held little appeal. His mind kept returning to Clara, to her question about the life he wanted. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine possibilities beyond the next hunt, a home, companionship, perhaps even a family again someday. The idea should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a cautious hope he had thought long buried in a grave alongside Sarah and their son. "You're thinking about that schoolteacher," Sheriff Brody observed, settling beside Noah with a cup of coffee. Noah didn't bother denying it. "Is it that obvious?" the sheriff chuckled. "Only to anyone with eyes." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "You know, Douglas could use a man with your skills. Deputy positions open since Michaels took that railroad job last month." Noah raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job, Sheriff?" "Thinking about it," Brody admitted. "Town's growing, mining companies bringing in more people every month. Could use someone who knows how to handle trouble before it starts." The offer was unexpected but not unwelcome. A deputy's position would mean stability, a chance to build something permanent and proximity to Clara while they explored whatever was growing between them. "I'll consider it," Noah said, more tempted than he wanted to admit. Morning brought the posse back to Douglas, their arrival causing quite a stir as they rode down the main street with their prisoners and the bodies of the dead outlaws. Townspeople emerged from shops and houses to witness the procession, murmuring in satisfaction at seeing the notorious Blackwell finally captured. Clara was teaching when they arrived, but word reached the schoolhouse quickly. She dismissed her class early, hurrying to the sheriff's office with her heart in her throat. The crowd outside told her the posse had returned, but she had no way of knowing if Noah was among them or if he was unharmed. She pushed through the onlookers, relief washing over her when she spotted Noah helping a wounded deputy from his horse. He looked exhausted and trail-worn but gloriously, wonderfully alive. Noah saw her at the same moment, their eyes meeting across the dusty street. Something in his expression made Clara's heart skip a beat of softness, a certainty that hadn't been there before. She waited as he handed the deputy over to the town doctor, spoke briefly with Sheriff Brody, and finally made his way to where she stood. "You came back," she said simply. Noah nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promised I would. Is it over? Is Blackwell?" "Captured," Noah confirmed. "He'll stand trial in Tucson along with the 2 survivors of his gang. Judge Parker's not known for leniency with men like them." Clara exhaled slowly, the fear that had lingered since her abduction finally beginning to dissolve. "Thank you for bringing them to justice." Noah shifted, suddenly looking almost uncertain, so different from the confident man who had faced down outlaws without hesitation. "Sheriff Brody offered me a position," he said, "as his deputy." Clara's heart quickened. "And will you accept?" "Depends," Noah replied, his voice low, "on whether there's a reason for me to stay in Douglas." Clara met his gaze steadily, summoning her courage. "I think there could be. If you're interested in exploring it." A small smile, the kind that transformed his entire face, appeared. "I am, very much so." The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm neither of them had anticipated, but both embraced wholeheartedly. Noah took the deputy position, proving himself invaluable to Sheriff Brody as Douglas continued to grow. His reputation as the man who had captured Blackwell lent him immediate respect among the townspeople, even those initially wary of newcomers. Clara's school flourished under her dedicated teaching. Children from mining families, ranches, and the Mexican Quarter filled the schoolhouse each day, eager for the knowledge she imparted with such enthusiasm. She introduced innovations, a small library of donated books, science experiments that delighted her pupils, music lessons when the church acquired a piano. In the evenings, they often walked together along the creek that ran behind the town, their conversations ranging from books to philosophy to their hopes for the future. Noah found himself sharing stories he had locked away for years, memories of his childhood in Texas, his time with the Rangers, even, eventually, the happiness he had known with Sarah and the devastating loss that followed. Clara listened without judgment, offering her own stories, in return her sheltered upbringing in Boston, her father's progressive views on women's education, her mother's dismay at her decision to travel west. "She thought I was throwing my life away," Clara confessed one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "Said no respectable man would want a wife who'd lived alone on the frontier." Noah's fingers tentatively entwined with hers. "Your mother's definition of respectable might need some adjustment," Clara laughed, leaning slightly against his shoulder. "I believe you're right." As autumn painted the mountains with gold and crimson, their relationship deepened beyond friendship into something neither could deny. Their first kiss came on a Sunday afternoon picnic by the creek, tentative at first, then with a passion that surprised them both. "I never expected to feel this way again," Noah admitted afterward, his forehead resting against hers. "After Sarah, I thought that part of my life was over." Clara stroked his cheek gently. "The heart has an infinite capacity for love. Loving again doesn't diminish what you had with her." "How did you get so wise?" he asked, a tenderness in his voice that made her breath catch. "I had an excellent teacher," she replied. "My father always said that life's greatest lessons come from its deepest sorrows." By Christmas, the whole town recognized them as a couple. Mrs. Cooper took particular satisfaction in the match, often inviting them to Sunday dinner at the parsonage with the smug expression of a successful matchmaker. Noah found himself settling into the community in ways he had never anticipated. He joined the volunteer fire brigade, helped organize shooting competitions to raise money for the school, even reluctantly agreed to play Joseph in the church's Christmas pageant at Clara's insistence. "I'm not an actor," he protested when she first suggested it. "You don't have any lines," Clara countered, her eyes twinkling. "Just stand there looking stoic and protective. You do that naturally." He couldn't refuse her a pattern he found both alarming and strangely satisfying. In January, news reached Douglas that Judge Parker had sentenced Blackwell and his remaining men to hang. The chapter was finally closed. That evening, Noah asked Clara to accompany him on a ride to a nearby hilltop, despite the winter chill. As they watched the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Noah seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "Is something wrong?" Clara asked, concerned by his unusual silence. Noah shook his head, taking her gloved hands in his. "The opposite." He took a deep breath. "Clara, when I made that promise to ride faster than sin itself to save you from Blackwell, I had no idea I was actually riding toward my future." Clara's heart began to race as he continued. "These past months with you have shown me that there's life beyond vengeance and solitude. You've taught me to hope again, to believe in possibilities I thought were lost forever." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small box. "I don't have much to offer except my heart and a promise to cherish you for all our days." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring set with a small sapphire. "Clara Beaumont, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she nodded, too overcome for words initially. "Yes," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Noah Mitchell, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and gathered her into his arms, Clara felt the journey that had begun with terror bandits taking her from the stagecoach had led to the greatest joy she could imagine. Their wedding in April was a community celebration. The schoolhouse and church were decorated with early spring flowers, and it seemed the entire town turned out to witness their union. Silas and Hannah Garrett made the journey from their ranch, Silas serving as Noah's best man while Hannah beamed from the front pew. Clara wore a gown of ivory satin that Mrs. Cooper and the church ladies had helped her make, with lace from her mother's wedding dress incorporated into the collar and cuffs. Noah, uncomfortable in his new suit, nevertheless stood tall and proud as she walked down the aisle to join him. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Cooper began, his voice carrying through the packed church, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Noah Mitchell and Clara Beaumont in holy matrimony." As they exchanged vows, Clara looked into Noah's eyes and saw the future they would build together, not without challenges, but rich with love and purpose. When he slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his voice clear as he promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Cooper declared. "You may kiss your bride." Noah's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a pledge of the life they would share. The church erupted in applause as they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell for the first time. The celebration continued well into the evening, with tables set up in the town square for a community feast. There was dancing to fiddle music, speeches from Sheriff Brody and Reverend Cooper, and enough cake to feed twice their number. As twilight descended, Noah found Clara standing slightly apart from the festivities, watching the dancers with a contented smile. "Happy, Mrs. Mitchell?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. Clara leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "More than I ever imagined possible." "I was thinking," Noah said, his voice thoughtful. "That little house behind the school is fine for a teacher, but perhaps too small for a deputy and his wife. Sheriff Brody mentioned that old Peterson place at the edge of town is for sale. It's got 3 bedrooms. Clara looked up at him, understanding his implication. 3 bedrooms? Noah's smile was tender as he placed a hand gently on her abdomen. "For the future, if you want that." "I do," Clara whispered, stretching up to kiss him. very much. In the years that followed, Douglas continued to grow, evolving from a frontier outpost into a proper town with a bank, a newspaper office, and eventually even a small college where Clara would later teach literature alongside her duties at the primary school. Noah rose from deputy to sheriff when Brody retired in 1884, earning respect throughout the territory for his fair but firm enforcement of the law. The desperate bounty hunter who had once ridden faster than sin itself to save a kidnapped schoolteacher became known as a pillar of the community, a man whose word was his bond. Their family grew as well. William Noah Mitchell arrived in the spring of 1879, a strong, healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. Emma Sarah followed 2 years later, and finally Thomas James in 1884, completing their family. On summer evenings, neighbors passing the Mitchell home could often hear Clara reading to the children on the wide front porch, or Noah teaching the boys to whittle while Emma practiced her letters. It was a life built on love, respect, and shared purpose, a future neither had dared imagine that fateful day when bandits rode off with a Boston schoolteacher, and a lone bounty hunter vowed to ride faster than sin itself to save her. On their 20th wedding anniversary, as they sat together on that same porch watching their children play in the yard, Clara turned to Noah with a question. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "settling down instead of continuing the life you had before?" Noah took her hand, the same tenderness in his touch as when he had first placed the ring upon her finger. "Not for a single moment," he said with absolute certainty. "The day I followed those bandits was the day I finally found my way home." Clara smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder as the sunset painted the western sky with the same colors as on the day he had proposed. "Then I'm glad they rode off with me," she said softly, "because it brought me to you." Noah's laugh was warm as he pressed a kiss to her temple. "Just don't tell the children their parents' courtship began with a kidnapping. It sets a terrible example." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the Arizona sky, they remained on the porch, hands entwined, hearts still beating as one a love story that had begun in danger but blossomed into a lifetime of happiness in the wild frontier they now called home.